We are online now.
I'm very pleased to be back here this morning, courtesy of the Dialogue Institute of Austin. And this morning we'll be talking with Dr. Thomas Michel. And wearing his other hat, he's Father Thomas. He's a Jesuit who's been a longtime student of John Paul II. And John Paul II is another one of our featured individuals who have fostered peace and dialogue throughout the world. Dr. Michel has a PowerPoint prepared for this, and so I'll welcome him and turn the program over to him. Dr. Michel?
Thank you. Good morning. It's good to be in contact with all of you, and as much as we can do so these at this time when it's difficult. What I wanted to talk to you about today is Pope John Paul II. He really was a very influential person in trying to shape and transform the attitudes of Catholic Christians about people of other religions. He was very much concerned with this from the beginning of the time he became Pope. And I want to give special attention today to Pope John Paul II's attitude towards Islam, and also say something about how Pope John Paul also was making efforts to change the Catholic community's attitudes towards Jews and Judaism. So this will be the main thing that I want to talk about during this time. So this will be our topic. In his very first encyclical, he was not even Pope for about a year, 1979. He wrote this encyclical, which is a letter by the Pope to all Catholics around the world. And he starts off very early. He says we have to come closer to the adherents of non-Christian religions. And he says 4 ways: through dialogue, through contacts, prayer in common, and investigation of the spirit of the treasures of human spirituality.
Dr. Michel, yes. I'm not sure your PowerPoint is showing up here.
You're not getting the PowerPoint?
No.
It says you're screen sharing.
I'm just seeing a blank screen.
What is this now? Now are you getting
There we go. There we go.
Let's see how we can do this. Make it big. You're still seeing it?
Yes, yes.
And let's see. Now are you seeing it?
Yes.
Still seeing it?
Yes.
Okay,
I think it's advanced several slides forward.
Now you're on Pope John Paul or
I'm on the Spirit of Truth.
Oh, okay. We'll go. How does one do this? Now what you get?
I've still got the Spirit of Truth.
Anything there?
Same thing.
Okay, let's try this from start. It worked when I practiced it. Now what's on there?
Just you.
Oh, you don't have the shared screen. Now anything?
Nope.
Hold on just a second. Now where are you?
Just you. Maybe you can just talk from your slides.
Okay, yeah, that's an idea.
I love those 4 points that you just made.
So you saw that much. I'm trying to get back to where the slides are. Okay, I'll just talk about them. So you still don't have anything, I guess.
No.
Still.
No.
Okay. I practiced this, it came out perfectly.
Oh, this technology is such an issue. But I know you know this backwards and forwards. So why don't you just share what you were planning to speak about today?
I will, just a second. I can't even get down.
We can see you and hear you.
Now am I back?
You are.
Okay, well, let's start. I don't have the PowerPoint, so the preparation that I made so meticulously, I'll do without. You know, if we go back to 1978, that's when Pope John Paul II was made Pope. The point of view of Catholics, I was a young priest already at that time, but the attitude of Catholics towards people of other religions was pretty much that they are in error, and sometimes the attitude was that they might even be worse than in error, that they might actually be agents of the devil, or they might be practices of the devil, and they'd be bad things, and they were the enemy of the truth, and we believed that the Catholic Church had all the truth, and even other Christians of other churches were in error. And so we were to defend the truth and preserve the truth. And this was a very common attitude among many Catholics right up until the time of Pope John Paul II. Pope Pius the Sixth, he tried to change things a little bit, but not so much, and he wasn't Pope very long. So when 78, when Pope John Paul II came in, this was the attitude of many in the church, people who were just ordinary people in the pews, as well as the leadership, the bishops, the cardinals, and all. So right away in his first encyclical, in his first letter to the Catholics around the world, he said, we have to come closer to people of other religions. And he says there's basically 4 ways of doing this. One is in dialogue. Another is in all kinds of contacts, being on committees together, being in social action programs together, any kind of contacts. And then he says a kind of striking one that people gave him a lot of trouble on. He said, we have to do prayer together. We have to pray to God together. And finally, he said we have to explore the treasures of human spirituality, because this is where we find our deepest relationship to God. So he said this we have to do with people of all religions. And so then he said we have to pay special attention to Jews and Muslims, because they, like us, share the faith of Abraham. And this idea of one Abrahamic tradition of faith was one that was a key idea going through Pope John Paul II's teaching, that Jews and Muslims and Christians are united in a special way because they're sharing the faith of Abraham. They're children of Abraham, sharing this faith of Abraham in the one God. So he was very attentive to trying to change some of the attitudes of Catholics towards Jews. You'll remember the long history of anti-Semitism and anti-Judaism that the Catholic Church and often its leadership fomented and perpetuated. And so the Pope was the first one to make an official visit to a synagogue. And he went to the Great Synagogue of Rome, was well accepted by the rabbi there and members of the congregation. And it really went a long way to hoping to resolve a bit the tensions that had often characterized Catholic-Jewish relations down through the centuries. Not long after that, the Pope went to Israel. He went to Israel, of course, as a pilgrim, as a Christian pilgrim, to visit the Christian sites of Jesus' life and death and resurrection. But he also took the time to visit Yad Vashem, which was the Jewish Holocaust Museum. He also went to the Wailing Wall, the western wall of the ancient temple, and he, like many pilgrims who go there, he left a prayer, which I would have read to you had I had the PowerPoint, but I don't. And so these were kind of 2, what you might call gestures of goodwill. More substantively, in 1998, he published a document which you can still find on the internet called We Remember, a reflection on the Shoah, in which the Pope does just what the document says. He reflects on the Shoah, and he sees the guilt that Christians have for not doing more to oppose the Nazis in their genocide. The guilt of Christians for allowing anti-Jewish hatred to exist and grow down through the centuries. And he made a point of distinguishing between the Nazi ideology, which he says has no Christian roots and is actually anti-Christian, and the traditional anti-Judaism that was so present often in the Catholic Church. So turning to what the Pope Paul said about Islam, in his first time he left Rome and made a visit to a foreign country, he went to Turkey. And in Ankara in Turkey, he met the Catholic community there. And he gave his talk to Catholics, and he says, you should be living well with Muslims. I wish I had the exact statements he made. I know he said they like you have the faith of Abraham. So this was a step forward. The council document said that Muslims presume to have the faith of Abraham. Well, somebody could take a very restrictive interpretation of that and say, well, Muslims like to call themselves children of Abraham, but they really aren't. He goes beyond that. He says, they, like you, have the faith of Abraham. He said they submit themselves to God, they try to do God's will, and they are in fact really servants of God, which of course is the translation of Abdullah. So he said, for this reason, we as Christians should be living well together. About a year later, he talked to a group in Mainz in Germany. This is a very different group. In Ankara, he spoke to Catholics in the Catholic Church in Ankara. But of course, they were people who were generally expatriates. In Mainz in Germany, he speaks to another group of expatriates, Muslim expatriates, Muslim workers from various Middle Eastern and North African countries. And he says, I understand how difficult it is for you to be practicing your faith and keeping your faith pure in this foreign country. But as migrants and people who have gone from their homeland to a new country, looking for work and trying to find a better life for themselves, you really are taking up the heritage of Abraham, who himself was a pilgrim going from his homeland to another land, bringing his faith to another land and living it there. And so in his final sentence of that talk, he says, so hold fast to your faith. He said, stay with it, and you'll give even us Christians a good example of what it means to be believers in today's world. And in the Arabic translation that the Vatican put out for the Arab speakers, he uses a strong word, it's temessikubi, which means hold fast, stay strong in your faith. And this is, of course, it sounds kind of normal to us, but at the time it was kind of shocking because many Catholics felt, well, what we're supposed to do is we don't want them to hold fast to their faith. We want them to become Christians. But he's saying, you have a faith and stick with the faith that you have. So time went on. In the course of his being Pope, he met over 50 times with Muslims. Pope John Paul II really almost never missed an opportunity to meet with Muslims. I was myself working in the Vatican that time as the one in charge of relations with Muslims. So anytime we'd get a delegation of Muslims from Yemen or Iran or Egypt or wherever they came from, I would accompany them to meet the Pope. And the thing that really impressed me about the Pope is when he met with Muslims, he'd skip all the small talk. So often when leaders political leaders, social leaders, religious leaders meet. A lot of it's kind of trying to avoid any issues that might be difficult. But he had something substantive to say, really, really every time. And if you get a chance, I would direct your attention to what to Pope John Paul's speech to Muslims in Morocco. That happened somewhere in the 1990s. I forget the exact year. I'm guessing about 1996. The King of Morocco, King Hassan, invited Pope John Paul to speak to the Muslim youth in Morocco, in Casablanca. And so they rented the soccer stadium, and 80,000 young people showed up. And his talk was really a beautiful one. He says, I come here to talk to you about God. He says, this is the thing that we want to talk about. And he did. So for 45 minutes, he gave this talk. And this is where I most am sorry that I can't share with you some of the quotes, because it was beautiful. And then he ended with a fairly long prayer to God together. So another one I would attract your attention to is the Pope's speech to Muslims in Belgium. That because Belgium, a modern Western country, kind of secularizing society, and he spoke to Muslims just on how Muslims ought to be living together with Christians. It was kind of the flip side of what he said to the Catholics in Turkey. And so look that up sometime. It's very, very, very concrete. Good message. So then, the final thing that I really wanted to mention about his teaching is, in preparation for the year 2000, he went over the Vatican Documents and tried to explore these documents in greater depth than were able to be talked about at the Second Vatican Council. So for 3 weeks running, he spoke about Nostra Aetate, which was the church's document on relations with non-Christian religions. And there he tried to describe the origin religions, which the Pope sees as coming from action of the Holy Spirit among people in the world, and various people, prophets and sages. They have this experience, powerful experience of God, of the Spirit of God working in them. And then when they put these into practices and prescriptions and rituals, then of course we have the origin of the various religions. So he mentioned over and over again, but particularly during these 3 weeks in 1999, that there is really one goal. There are many paths that lead to that goal, and if each of us follow the path faithfully, he said the very fact that there are many goals should not lead us to a kind of relativism, that it doesn't make any difference what religion you belong to, but rather that Christians should be real Christians, follow our path as fully and deeply as we can. At the same time, we see Muslims and Jews and Hindus and Buddhists and others following their path. And he says we don't have to see each other as competitors so much as brothers and sisters who are heading to the same end, the same goal. So these are some of the things that I wanted to say. I remember when Pope John Paul was very old, and he was really almost dying, and then he did die. When he died, we had so many calls from Muslims who wanted to be at the funeral. People from all over the world were calling up, and important Muslims, heads of state, and religious leaders. We could have had St. Peter's Basilica half full of Muslims if we had had place for them, if we had room for them. He was really, to me, this underlines how much Muslims accepted his message and loved him and really revered him. It's hard to go back always and to recreate the spirit of a time past, but I remember working in the Vatican at that time, and it's just there people wanting to come, and we say, "Well, we're sorry, we're there. It's a big church, but it's not big enough." And so they did get a large place, but not nearly what they would have liked. And another thing that I want to mention, this is more various religions. 1986, Pope John Paul II called for a day of prayer for peace among people of various religions, and he chose the little town of Assisi, where St. Francis of Assisi lived. For those of you who know St. Francis, he was a man of peace. He was a man who, at the time of wars with Muslims, went in peace to meet the Sultan in Egypt. He was somebody who always was preaching peace among all people. So the Pope felt this was a good place to have this prayer of prayer for peace. So we did. I was working at the Vatican then, and the first year it was really difficult to find anybody. My job was to invite Muslims and to get them to come, and I was only able to find, I think, 4 or 5 people. And I think that was because still at that time, people didn't know. And I think many Muslims were kind of suspicious that maybe the Pope would get everybody together and tell them that they all ought to become Christians or something like that. And they were quite hesitant. We only got 5 people, and they were not very representative people. But then 2 years later, we did it again. There was a good Muslim delegation of 30 to 50 people. People had realized that this was a good thing. It's something that they wanted to be part of. Well, by the end, we did it every 2 years, I think, for the next 25 or 30 years, something like that. And by the end, once again, there wasn't enough place on the podium for all the Muslim leaders that wanted to be there. And so you can see in the course of this that the trust wasn't there at the beginning, but the trust had to be slowly and even laboriously built. And I think that there's a lesson for all of us in interreligious relations. We can't presume trust at the beginning. It's something that we have to work at, something we have to stick with, and it's something we have to carry on for without giving up. We have to persevere at it. So these would be some of the things that I could remember without my notes.
That was great. And what an inspiration. And how fortunate you were to have a front row seat to history changing. So many centuries of intolerance and mistrust. You're right, it can't be overturned in a day, a month, a year. But over time, those things really are key to change the world, and they do change the world. Dialogue, contacts with other religions, praying together, and exploring the treasures of human spirituality. We have so much to thank Pope John Paul II for, and so much to thank you for sharing this with us.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Goodbye, all.
Goodbye.